Let's just bring in Kit Bond, the Republican senator from Missouri, who's joining us today from D.C. Senator, always good to see you, sir. Welcome back.
Oh, thank you. It's a great honor to be on one of my favorite shows.
Oh, that's so nice of you.
Do you have a Nielsen box, by chance?
They can't reach me, but I'd vote for it.
Should General Motors be allowed to go into bankruptcy? Let me start with that. The story we're just now following here in the last few minutes. What do you think should happen there?
We had hoped they could avoid bankruptcy, but if they cannot, there ought to be a prepackaged bankruptcy because we've got to keep General Motors and Ford, and we hope maybe a Fiat Chrysler healthy because we have too many jobs in America that depend upon the auto industry.
You know, early on they were arguing that bankruptcy would be a disaster. I mean, are you convinced that the government guarantees that the president has promised for warranties and things like that as part of a prepackaged bankruptcy can alleviate the concerns of consumers who would not otherwise want to buy a vehicle from a bankrupt automaker?
I would hope so, but frankly, the record of the Treasury in the last several months, actually in the last half year or so, is not too reassuring.
All right, let me ask you about this other story right now. A group of GOP senators, your brethren, about a half hour ago, held this news conference where they are going to urge some sort of regulation to allow for banks to repay TARP money when they want to, rather than waiting for Treasury to accept that money. Where do you stand on all of this right now?
Well, I think it's time to get the TARP out of the business of running banks. I don't like to have the federal government in a controlling position telling banks how to run their business. The federal government doesn't do a good job of running its business. Certainly we in Congress leave a lot to be desired. And I think the sooner you can put these banks back either without the TARP money, or if they can't make it, it's time to bring in the FDIC and do what the FDIC does so well when a bank or savings and loan fails. Senator? And that's remove the toxic assets, the leadership, and send out a clean, functioning, smaller entity back into the market.
Senator, sorry to bring up a delicate matter here, but doesn't this bill that the Republicans are pursuing that would allow the banks to pay back TARP sooner have almost no chance whatsoever of passing? Are you guys just doing this for public relations purposes?
Well, I can't speak for the guys who talked about it. I'm worrying about a lot of things, including the TARP and how they're running it, as well as the problems we have in the intelligence area where I serve as vice chairman. So I haven't followed their efforts, but I do know that there are a lot of banks who really chafe under the stigma of having TARP money. And it's about time we let the banks that are healthy get back out and do what banks do. That's lend and we hope make a profit and grow and make more loans.
Senator, this is Keith Boykin. I'm a former Missourian, so I wanted to say hello to you for that.
Hey, Keith, where are you from?
From St. Louis, Missouri, actually. Okay. But I wanted to ask you a question because a lot of the rules that were set up were actually set up by Hank Paulson in the Bush administration, including the repayment terms. Were you going along with that back then when they set up those terms, or is this a new change for you?
If you'll look back at my comments, I supported Hank Paulson when he said he was going to take the toxic debt out. Even President Obama, in his speech to the Congress in January, said we got to take the toxic assets out. And instead of doing that, Hank Paulson practiced adhocracy, throwing more money into large institutions. We have not yet seen an effective effort to get the toxic debt out of the system. And until you do that, it's not a liquidity problem. It's a counterparty problem.
Senator, can I turn you to the issue of taxation, specifically overseas taxation? There are a lot of...
Oh, the Brits.
Yeah, well, part of that, yes. I mean, we've seen some bombshells really dropped this morning by Mr. Darling over in the UK, suggesting extremely high tax rates for the highest earners, 50%. Right. Your response to that, and whether or not you think perhaps the U.S. is going to end up going down that road as well, and also the very thorny issue of taxing overseas profits.
All right, number one on the Brits tax, that 50% is a disaster for their economy, and it shows they've been drinking the liberal Democrat Kool-Aid from the United States. And if President Obama is successful in doubling our debt to $11.7 trillion in 10 years and tripling it in 15 years, then there are going to be tax rates out the ceiling, and we're going to have to print money. We will have hyperinflation. If the Obama budget goes through, the sky's the limit on taxes, and we'll still probably have to print money to finance what would be in 15 years $1 trillion interest payment on debt alone.
So I want to take you back to the issue that you raised of removing some of the leadership from the banks. Do you think that some of those CEOs need to go at this point, and who, if so?
If you find that the banks are not healthy, if you find that a bank has too much bad assets, you send the FDIC in. They've done this. They did this with IndyMac. We did the same thing in the savings and loan crisis in the late 80s and 90s. We had to put out money, over $600 billion. But they took the toxic assets, they cleaned up the institution, sent them back out in the market, and taxpayers recovered about 80% of what they've spent. Now, I don't see the chances of our recovering the TARP money, getting 80% of that back from what has been spent under the Geithner and Paulson treasuries as being likely to come back. So I think we've poured a lot of money out and haven't gotten the results we need.
Okay, Senator, let's talk the PPIP, the Toxic Assets Purchase Plan, and also the TALF, that program aimed at loosening up lending for car loans, student loans, and that kind of thing. You know, so far in the TALF, it was supposed to $100 billion, leverage up to $1 trillion, and only $5 billion have been offered under that program. And under the PPIP, J.P. Morgan Chase, one of the biggest banks in the world, says we're not taking part in that. Now, this is seen largely as a fact that Washington keeps smacking the daylights out of the banks. Are you guys making the Treasury's job harder?
Anytime we try to run an institution that we give money to, we're going to tell them what the salaries are, we're going to tell them what the promotions are, what the bonuses are. That is interfering with the management of the banks. That's why I don't like pouring money into banks. And I've heard from people who've looked at the TALF that the regulations are so convoluted and difficult they can't use it. I believe going down the line of adhocracy, of putting more money in institutions, unless they go through the formal restructuring activities of the FDIC, is a bad idea. We still haven't gotten the toxic assets out of the system. When we do, I think the economy will begin to recover, unless the Obama budget kills it.
Senator Bond, we're always appreciative of your time, sir. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you very much.
Kit Bond, Republican from Keith Boykin's home state of Missouri there.
Mine.
I think we should have Kit Bond come up and spend an hour with us. I think it'd be fun.